Hello. Yeah, it's been a little while since I've done a video. This is still in Genesis, getting close to the end. Um, Chapter 38 and 39. So now we are getting close to the next generation. Or we are in the next generation, that's right. So chapter 38 is about Judah's life. Judah, who's supposed to be the father of the Jews, current day Jews. Um, Now he had a good friend named Hua, who was an, I thought this said adulteramite, but it's adultamite. It's kind of interesting name. But while visiting him, Judah saw a beautiful Canaanite woman named Shua, and he fell in love, and they got married. They had three sons. The oldest, E-R, his name was maybe been Er, but when he was old enough, Judah found him a wife named Tamar. Well, was a very wicked person, so God killed him. Yeah, I was like, okay. Well, the second son, Onan, when he got a little older, when he was old enough, he was married to Tamar. But the way it worked, that if the oldest son died and have an heir with his wife, the second son then married her, and her firstborn son would be the dead brother's child, considered the dead brother's child. Onan didn't like that. So Onan married her, went in, had sex, but pulled out before ejaculating. That's why this channel is not for kids. And spilled his seed on the ground, and God didn't like that. So he killed him. Oh, poor Tamar. And Judah, what's with your kids? So the youngest son was still way too young to get married. So Judah told Tamar to go back to her father's house and live there and wait for Shelah to get a bit older, and then that she would be married to him. Well, Judah's wife Shua died. By the time spelled Sheila, grew up, Judah's wife Shua died, and Judah did not marry Sheila to Tamar. And Tamar's at her father's house waiting, and she's promised to be married to him. Well, when it didn't happen, she heard about Judah going up to his friends and with the flocks to feed the flocks. And so what she did is she took off her widow's weeds, put on a shawl around her head so you couldn't see who she was, and she sat by the side of the road like a harlot. Now, I guess a harlot's slightly different than a prostitute. I'm not quite sure the differences, but there seems to be a slight difference there. Anyhow, Judah saw her, and he's missing his wife, and he's like, hey, let's have sex. And she said, what will you pay me? And he said, you can have one of the goats. And she said, well, give me some collateral. And she didn't use the word collateral, but he's like, well, what do you want? She said, well, in those days, you used to wear a signet. It's like a something that's carved that you could stamp wax with and things like that, but you wore it around your neck on a cord. It was kind of like your identification. And he also had did they call it a scepter? No, his staff for collateral. So he's like, well, okay. And so they had sex, and then Judah went back to his friend and said, oh, let's pick out a goat to send to the woman. And his friend took the goat over there, and the woman had disappeared. And he asked around, and everybody was like, no, there's no harlot that hangs out on the street here. And so Judah was like, well, this is embarrassing. I don't want everybody to know what just happened. So he kind of just put off to the side. 3 months later, he gets word that Tamar's pregnant, and she had played the harlot. And he's like, burn her, bring her out, we're going to burn her. And she sent, when they came to get her, she gave the messengers, whatever, the staff and the signet and the cord, and said, "Take this to Judah and see if he recognizes them." And Judah, they took him to Judah, and Judah was like, "Oh my, whoa, okay, I'm the father. Yeah, so we won't burn her." And he's like, she was in her right in a way, because he had promised. She had been promised to marry Sheila, and he didn't follow through on the promise. So she had the right to get her money back. So she had twins. Now they never had sex after that. Judah was like, "No, you're in the right. You're in the right. I won't burn you. I'll help you with the kids, but I will not have anything to do with you." So Tamar had twins, Perez and Zerah. And actually, it seems like these two sons are actually the fathers of the Jewish nation now. Became the fathers of the Jewish nation, and very interesting little side bit there. So Judah wasn't really a bad guy. Okay, chapter 39. Oh, this is going really long, sorry. Chapter 39. Joseph is sold to an Egyptian, Potiphar, who was an official of Pharaoh. And the Lord stayed with Joseph. So Joseph did really well. He worked in the household, and he did really well. And Potiphar made him his assistant and head of the household. So Joseph had say in everything. Everybody had to come to him for his permission. So he was getting pretty powerful, and he did really well. And Potiphar's wealth grew. Now Joseph was also very handsome, and Potiphar's wife was like, "Ooh, I want some of that." She's like, "So come sleep with me." He's like, "No, that would be wrong. I will not do it." And he left, and she kept bugging him. And then one day when he went to I don't think he lived in the house, but when he went to the house, he was the only person in there beside the wife. And the wife grabbed him by his cloak and said, "You will sleep with me," or something like that. And he's like, "No, I won't." And he ran out and left the cloak behind. Well, she came up with the story about, how Joseph tried to rape her, and she screamed, and she told it to all the servants, and then she told it to her husband, who of course asked the servants, and they're like, "Well, yeah, that's what happened," even though they weren't there. And so Potiphar had Joseph thrown into prison. Again, God was with him, and he found favor in the chief jailer, and the chief jailer put him in charge of the rest of the prisoners. So the chief, any kind of problems, any kind of questions, stuff like that, the prisoners were to go to Joseph. So he became more powerful again. He got another rank of power, which is kind of cool. So I wrote down here that, like Abraham, even though his father was fairly wealthy, Abraham worked and built his wealth. Of course, he got some from the former pharaoh of Egypt, and go back to the other videos to see that. But he also raised his son Isaac to work, even though Abraham became very wealthy. Isaac was expected to work and start building his own wealth that he would inherit. Isaac raised Esau and Jacob the same way. They needed to work. They needed to start building their own wealth, even though they would inherit Jacob more than Esau. But Jacob had to go and work for, 20 years to get his 2 wives and then the 2 concubines. And, he had to work and build up his wealth and stuff. He had to play the trickster, became Israel. And now Israel is having his 12 sons do the same. They have to work and to build up their own wealth. Now Joseph, who was only 17 when he went to Egypt, had to learn how to be a businessman. He had to remember what his father had taught him about being in charge, because they all had servants and stuff and people that they had to take care of. and supervise and stuff like that, so, and manage. So Joseph applied what he learned from his father, who learned it from his father, who passed it down. So these guys were all very entrepreneurial. They were great businessmen. They were very intelligent, which is really quite interesting. So, you want to be wealthy? Don't just, your father, grandfather has lots of money. Don't just sit on your ass expecting to get the money one day. Get your butt up, get a job, do the work, start your own business, whatever, and start your own wealth. So, that's the lesson for today. I hope you liked it, and if you did, please subscribe. Thanks. Bye.